One does not know the honor of emperor if not seeing the Grand Imperial Palace. Palace Museum, also called Forbidden City, wrote the last magnificent chapter for China's feudal dynasty. As the biggest surviving, most complete ancient wood structure architecture complex of China, Palace Museum is not only the most important protection unit of cultural relics, but also the common cultural relics of the world. This incomparable Asian architecture is in the center of Beijing, and it is the imperial palace of Ming and Qing dynasties. It accounts for more than 720,000 square meters, with about 9,000 wood palaces in it. It was built in 1406 and finished after 14 years. 24 emperors ascended the throne here one after another. Viewing the Palace Museum, visitors enter through Tiananmen rostrum, going forward following their own imaginary picture. Passing through a square covered with green bricks, you can reach the Forbidden City's front door, Meridian City. East, west, and north of the Meridian City are walls joined together. A quadrat square is rounded by them. An artificial river flowing through the square is like a big blind bowl. The 5 stone bridges covering the river is the inner gold water bridge, all made of white marble, covering about the waves as exquisitely carved jade bricks. Palace Museum is strictly built according to principle of building imperial palaces, divided into 2 parts, the outer palace and the inner court, with the gate of celestial purity as the dividing line. South of the gate of celestial purity is the outer palace, and north of the gate is the inner court. The layout of palace is rigorous and well organized. Every inch of brick is following the feudal etiquette, presenting supreme imperial authority. The peaceful gate is a solemn portal of outer palace, and the highest palace gate of the Forbidden City. The peaceful gate is the place where emperors deal with political things. After the rulers of Man and Qing enter into the Shanghai Pass, Emperor Shunzhi published the Bell of Oblivion here. The outer palace of Forbidden City with Peaceful Palace, Zhonghe Palace, and Baohe Palace as its center, is the place where the emperors grant an interview to ministers and hold large ceremonies, also called the Front Palace. As the highest architecture in Palace Museum, the big 3 palaces locate on the huge 3-layer white marble stalagmite, with front Peaceful Palace, middle Zhonghe Palace, and back Baohe Palace, showing incomparable noble status. The Peaceful Palace, also called the Throne Room, is the number 1 of the 3 biggest palaces. There is a wide white marble floor. The triple-layer step progresses from the bottom. The floor displays a sundial, a green mirror, a copper tortoise, a copper stalk, and 18 copper bells. Tortoise and stalk symbolize longevity. Sundial is the timer in ancient times, and the green mirror is the standard mirroring vessel in ancient times, both the symbol of imperial power. The Peaceful Palace is the architecture of largest body, highest level in Forbidden City, with luxurious decoration. Many people think that Peaceful Palace is the place emperor meets ministers. Actually not quite correct. The Peaceful Palace is a place to hold ceremonies, and it is rarely used to meet ministers. In Ming and Qing dynasties, emperors often meet ministers in Peaceful Gate and Qianqing Gate. When there are important things, emperors meet ministers in Qianqing Palace. In the late Qing dynasty, Empress Dowager Cixi reigned behind the curtain. Therefore, the place emperor meeting ministers became the hall of mental cultivation. In Ming and Qing dynasties, 24 emperors held ceremonies in peaceful palace, such as a new emperor's accession, emperor's wedding, and crown empress. Moreover, an annual ceremony Wen Shou, New Year's Day and Winter Solstice Festival, emperors accepted ministers' celebration and gave feast to them. In early Qing dynasty, the final imperial examination was held here. Therefore, the superb qualities of construction specification, exquisite decoration skill, can rank first in Chinese ancient architecture. In front of palaces in Palace Museum, there are many impressive, delicately decorated copper iron clocks. What functions do these clocks have? They are not useless setting, but important tools to put out fire. In winter, it is easy to break out fire, but the water is frozen. Therefore, according to principles of palace, every clock is equipped with burning coals and will be added water at regular time, to promise there is enough water to put out the fire. It has great significance for fire prevention. Therefore, they are also called auspicious clock or peaceful clock. Zhonghe Palace lies behind the peaceful palace, its roof carved with yellow glazed tiles. The highest point is installed with gold round treasure top like a big pearl. There are gold bricks covering the earth in palace and doors on its four sides. The throne is in the center of the palace. Hanging above is a plaque carved with characters 允之绝重 by Emperor Qianlong. Zhonghe Palace is built in 1420 in Ming and Qing dynasties. Before going to peaceful palace to hold ceremonies, emperors will have a rest in Zhonghe Palace, accepting ministers' worship. When there are sacrifice ceremonies, emperors viewed sacrificial oration ahead a day to show his sincerity. Baohe Palace behind Zhonghe Palace is one of three big palaces. The meaning of its name is to keep mind and will pure, enjoy world harmony. The harmonious decoration and display partial to red in Baohe Palace appear to be luxurious and splendid. The throne is decorated with gold paint, and the 6 colored paintings on roof beam are very special. It uses reducing column method in architecture and reduce the 6 columns of the palace to make space more capacious. Baohe Palace has different uses in Ming and Qing dynasties. In Ming dynasty, emperors dress here before ceremony. Emperors accepted celebration here when title conferring queen and prince. In Qing dynasty, on the eve of Lunar New Year and Lantern Festival, emperors gave feast to foreigners, the nobility, and ministers. In early Qing dynasty, before back 3 palaces were recovered, Emperor Shunzhi and Kangxi had lived here. Emperor Shunzhi's wedding is held here, called Weiyu Palace at that time, and renamed to be Qingning Palace in Emperor Kangxi period. Palace Museum is the product of ancient Chinese people's wisdom and labor. At the social production connections of that time, producing such grand architecture complex fully reflects ancient Chinese working people's high creativity. The stones used to build palace museum always weigh several tons, even dozens, hundreds of tons. The cloud dragonstone sculpture on back steps of Baohe Palace is the largest stone sculpture in Imperial Palace, with more than 200 tons. Formerly, it is a stone sculpture of Ming Dynasty, carved again in Emperor Qianlong period. The bottom carved with sea and river, clouds carved in metal serve as a foil to 9 dragons. Elaborately and vividly carved, has great artistic value. Going through 3 palaces, crossing the gate of celestial purity, the inner court of Palace Museum comes into your sight. The inner court is with Qianqing Palace, Jiutai Palace and Kunming Palace as its axis. The east 6 palaces are on east side of inner court, and the west 6 palaces are on the west side. The inner court is a place where emperor deals with political affairs and concubines live. The gate of celestial purity square is the dividing line of outer palace and inner court. The gate of celestial purity is the front gate of inner court. It was built in Emperor Yongle period of Ming Dynasty, later rebuilt for many times. The existing architecture is built in 1798. In Qing Dynasty, here is the place where emperors administer affairs. To symbolize emperor's supremacy, outer-court's architecture style highlights solemn magnificence and majesty. In contrast, the second half of inner court is full of living atmosphere. The architecture is separate from each other, including flower gardens, study, museum pralines, and fountains. The construction area of Palace of Heavenly Purity is the biggest of the inner court. On the open platform, there are copper tortoise, copper crane, sundial, and green measure on its left and right side, with 4 gold incense burners in front. Here is the important place where emperors live, deal with political affairs, meet ministers and foreign envoys, and hold banquets. The front palace of Heavenly Purity has a big plaque carved with honesty and fairness, written by Emperor Shunzhi in Qing Dynasty. The feudal rulers seem to claim honesty and fairness, but do intrigue secretly. The struggle between princes to seize the throne is quite fierce. The Emperor Yongzheng had ever ordered to put the Jianchu box behind the honesty and fairness plaque. The ordered prince will take over the throne. In Qing Dynasty, Palace of Heavenly Purity is the place where coffin was put after emperor's death. No matter where the emperor is dead, his coffin will be moved to Palace of Heavenly Purity for several days. After a regulated ceremony is held, his coffin will be moved to Zhouhuang Palace or other palaces. Finally, a date is selected to hold the funeral, and the coffin is buried in the imperial tomb. Jiutai Palace, located between Palace of Heavenly Purity and Palace of Earthly Tranquility, is a square palace which has quadrangle pyramidal roof, gold chair top. There is a caisson on the roof and a throne in the palace. Upon the throne hangs a plaque carved Wu Wei. There is a bold screen written Jiutai Palace inscription behind the throne. There is a copper hourglass on the left side, and a big clock on its right side. The Time Palace takes the clock and hourglass as standard. Jiaotai Palace is the place where receiving presents at Queen's birthday or important festivals. After Emperor Qianlong period, the 25 imperial seals were stored here. Emperor Shunzhi had set an iron code of imperial harem is not allowed to intervene in political affairs. The Palace of Earthly Tranquility and Palace of Heavenly Purity on the north of Inner Court are the traditional living palaces separately for emperors and queens. Heavenly Purity means clear sky and quiet earth. Earthly Tranquility means being in rain forever. Palace of Earthly Tranquility locates on the north of Jiaotai Palace. Passing through the Gate of Earthly Tranquility, one can get to the Imperial Garden. In Ming Dynasty, Palace of Earthly Tranquility is the living palace of Queen, with warming rooms on both ends. In Qing Dynasty, Palace of Earthly Tranquility was rebuilt according to customs of man nationality. It became the place where shamanism prays to the gods in the palace. The east warming room is the bridal chamber for emperors. Emperor Kangxi, Tongzhi, Guangxu, and Puyi. They all lived here for 2 days when they got married. Then they will move to Palace of Earthly Tranquility or the Hall of Mental Cultivation. However, Queen did not live there either. The colorful architecture at the Palace Museum is fascinating, but precious cultural relics displayed in Palace are amazing. The exhibition hall of Palace Museum has many precious cultural relics installed. Many of them are